G'day and welcome to another Blender Guru long format tutorial. It's been a while since I've done one of these long ones, but people have been requesting it, so here it is. In this video, you're going to learn how to make snow, realistic looking snow. We did a tutorial about 3 years ago on snow, but look, it looks pretty crap, right? It doesn't look that real. So thought we'd have another crack at it. So my team has been working on finding a new method for making snow which actually looks real. It's actually hard to pull off. Like if you look like on CG forums and stuff, like a lot of people have a go at snow, but it generally just looks like sort of mushy paste on the ground or just way too smooth. So anyways, Gilherm Henrik has been working with me and he made this fantastic image that you can see in front of you. And yeah, we've got it down to a method that you yourself can create easily at home. So we'll be sharing that in this video. But essentially, this tutorial is it's designed to be used across a whole variety of different scenes. So it's supposed to look like the standard snow on the ground. So whether you're making a street scene, forest, is there snow in forest? Field, any sort of snow, anything that's built up on the ground, you can use this method for all of that. So it's a lot of fun. Once you figure it out, it's like, oh yeah, now I get it. This is how this is how snow looks. So we're talking all about that. I'll give you a quick overview of all the main points in the tutorial right now. So we start with a plane in Blender, and then we paint out some, the basic shape of the tire tracks, just so we know. Then we open that up in Photoshop, and this is where we're going to do most of the detailed painting. So we start by replacing it with some detailed tire tracks, then the tire track crevice, which gives it that depth. Then this raised surface area, then some snow scuffs, let me zoom in there, over the top of it, and then finally some footprints at the end. So this is a grayscale black and white image, which then we're going to put into Blender to use as a displacement mask. And so Blender then uses this as the height map for the ground, and that is where you get all your detail in there. Then we're going to be using Pro Lighting Skies, the add-on, to create this outdoor lighting effect. If you don't have the add-on, you can just use a standard sun lamp. And then we're going to be getting into the, whoops, what is it doing? Then we're going to be getting into the material. It looks fairly complex here, but I assure you it is very simple. I mean, this part here is just like a duplicate of the one underneath it anyway. So yeah, just setting up some really basic things, trying to get that, the little glittery effect across the surface and an, subsurface scattering and different things like that. And then finally at the end of it, we'll be adding in some trees along the background there to finish it off. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open up a new scene in Blender. First thing we're going to do is, shock horror, delete the default cube and the default lamp, and we're going to replace it with a plane. And this is going to be our snow. So scale it up to fit roughly the grid floor, however big you want your scene to be. And and at this point, by the way, make sure you apply the scale by hitting Control A, scale. Otherwise, that will cause very weird problems when you do the displacement and other things. So make sure you apply that scale. And now we need to give it some geometry. And the reason for that is that displacements, they need geometry to work, and we've only got 4 vertices to play with, so that would not be good. So I'm going to go and subdivide it a total of 65 times. That sounds very specific, and it is. Well, it doesn't really matter all that much. I just found that, roughly 4,000 faces, which you can see in the top there, this is, it gives you enough sort of geometry to play with. You can add a subsurf modifier, which we will as well, but, just set it to 65, all right? Gosh. So now I'm going to start positioning the, setting up the scene from the position of the camera. So I'm going to go to the front, hit Control Alt number pad 0, and just position your camera wherever it is that you want it. So yeah, somewhere about here looks pretty good. Okay, yeah, this scene is going to be very very artistically pleasing because we're going to have the focus entirely on the tire tracks. not the most normal of scenes, but we want to have a look at our tire tracks. So I'm positioning the camera, right about here. Now we need to do some painting in Blender. Now the reason, of course, we want to do the painting in Blender is so that when we go to Photoshop or GIMP or whatever it is you want to use, you actually know where it is that you're painting in relation to your scene. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, it will soon. Okay, so go ahead and split the view and go to UV Image Editor. Now before we add an image to start painting, we need to UV unwrap it. So go Tab or Edit mode, and hit U, and then select Unwrap. The easiest of all objects to unwrap, a plane. At this point, it's always a good idea just to check, by the way, just click this little button down there, that little tiny one, and just to check that it's rotated the correct way. And in this way, you can see that it is, because sometimes what you'll do is you UV unwrap it and you think like, oh yeah, it's perfect. It's exactly the way I want it. And then later on you find that, wait a minute, that's not perfect. Like that doesn't line up with the camera at all. And it's annoying. So that's why, oh no, hang on. Which way did I rotate it? Huh? No, wrong way. I did this to show you how you don't want it to be. Okay. All right. So there we go. Now that it's perfect. So I'm going to go ahead now and add a new image, which is something you do when you want to do some painting in Blender. So I'm going to load this in here. Now, the size of your image is important because the higher, the bigger the size, the more detail you can actually paint in when you do your displacements. So I'm going to set the width and height of this to 4096 or 1024 times by 4. You didn't know that, did you? You could actually do math in the number fields. Yeah, I don't know if that's new to you. I only just discovered it again like a year ago. I'm like, oh yeah, you can do that thing. You don't have to get the calculator out. All right. Snow painting map is what we'll call it. Leave the color as black and hit OK. And there we go. So now if you want to paint onto this, you would go into paint mode and you could just start painting. But that's no good because you can't actually see it on your model, which is the whole point of doing this. So you can actually see where it's actually going to be, when you do the painting, right? So what you want to do is over here, if you go to texture paint, you would see a big purple plane here. And now this could confuse you if you're used to an older version of Blender, because normally it bases whatever here is depending on what's in the UV image editor. Which, but now that we're using the brand, well, not brand new, it's a few years. We're using Cycles now. It's basing it on the active material node image texture. All right. So just split the view again here. I'm going to go to the node editor, add a new material, and then all you need to do here is add an image texture, and then click Snow Painting Map, the one that we just created. And that's it. You don't even have to connect it to anything. You just have to have it physically selected, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Whatever. We've selected it. Now, when we paint over here, look at that. You can see it's over there. And if you paint over here, hey. No. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to paint, from the point of view of the camera. You just want to go like, where do you actually want the tire tracks? So I would go like, all right, round about there and around about there. But, and this is a problem, right? Is when you look at this, you go like, well, that's, well, for one, I mean, the perspective's all wrong. But let's just focus on the scale. Like, how big are tire tracks in relation to the scene? Because it's good to have something of scale to base it off. Because otherwise you're going to start, painting in things. And then it's like, how wide should the tire tracks be? It's just everything is by eye. And just in Blender, it's good to work with scale as best you can. So I find it's very helpful to add something of scale, like a human being. All right. Now, obviously, we're not going to model a human being. I'm going to show you very quickly how to quickly add a human in Blender. If we just go to File, User Preferences, and then just type in Rigify, enable that add-on there. And then if you go to the Object mode, go to Armature, Human. There we go. Now that is the scale of a human. So already I can see that I've actually made something wrong. Like the camera's too low. Like I actually want it to kind of be at human height, or roughly human height. So I don't know, like there. Yeah. Okay. So, and we know that this is human height, by the way. if you go to the hit N to bring up this, you can see that he is 1.93 meters tall. And you can check that, that's true. If you go to metric, you can actually change the units in Blender. Go to metric. 1.93 meters tall. So the average size of a Dutchman, I guess. I don't know. I'm 1.85, I think. So it's a little tall. I really think that was probably based off the average Dutchman, which makes sense. It's the Blender Foundation. That's where they're based. So, but anyway, so 1.93, yeah. Anyways, that's basically the whole point is I'm trying to say is this is the size of a man, okay? So this is helpful because now when you go to paint, it's like now I actually know how big the tire track should be. Like I think actually, if I look, like this isn't big enough. Like this brush size, like how big is, like your foot fits in a tire track, like if it's on the road. So I think if he's wearing shoes, like it's at least that big. Maybe even a little bigger. And so this is why we're doing this exercise here, is to check the scale of things and the placement. So I'm going to put one tire track here and one tire track here, and I'm not going to paint from this view because, as you saw before, it like extrapolates it like it's a camera projection. So now that that's there, I'm just going to quickly draw out where I actually want my tire track to be. Now you could make an interesting sort of whoop, I don't know. How should it be? I reckon that's all right. Yeah, that's pretty good. So just a basic shape of it like that, all right? And that's it. And I don't know, if you really wanted to, I suppose you could check like how big should a footprint be and go like that big, right? That's the size that a footprint should be. All right. Okay. So now what we're going to do is save this image. Very important because otherwise, well, you can't open it in Photoshop. But yeah. All right. I'm not going to restart this tutorial. I've already done this twice because I keep messing it up and I say something stupid. Then I get self-conscious and then I start all over. So we're just going to save this. Snow painting map. Save as image. All right, so go ahead now, and you can see I'm watching some YouTube videos to procrastinate. And we're going to load it up in our image editing software of choice. Now, in my case, I obviously prefer Photoshop. If you want to use GIMP, that's fine. We don't have to start a war over it, But I will say one thing. Some people say, like, Andrew, you should be using GIMP because GIMP can do everything that Photoshop can. Which might be true, but that's not enough of the argument, okay? I'm going to just spend a little moment here because people say that a lot. Like, it can do everything that X software can do, right? But you can also go from New York to London via dinghy. I know that's not a fair comparison, but that's not the end-all goal, like just to find software that is as good as another one, like that can do the same thing. It's more than that. It's what can get you there the fastest with the least amount of pain and the most amount of flexibility. And I personally find that Photoshop fits that for me. For me, all right? I just find the brushes, it gives you a lot more control over the brush types, masking and layers. And just overall, the interface I find is a lot better. It's not perfect. There's a whole bunch of problems, which I'm sure I'll run into in this tutorial. But overall, I like Photoshop, all right? Now, before I start, I will say I am using a tablet. A stylus, okay? You don't need a stylus to follow this, but it will absolutely certainly help because you will be able to use pen pressure sensitivity. So you can like fade in and out depending on how hard you're pressing. So that's definitely going to help, but you can use a mouse if that's all you have as well. Whew. All right, let's get painting. Whew. We're only 10 minutes in. All right, in this part, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a new layer directly underneath this map here. And I'm going to actually, let's just hide that one. And I'm going to set this color to be gray, like a 50% blend of white and black. And that value there seems about the right one. So, sorry about that. My phone just fell off the screen. 50%. And load that into the background by hitting Control Backspace. And there it is, loaded in there. Now, the reason I'm setting that to be 50% gray is that the displacement will work based on the dark and the light values. So for example, a dark value, this would become a hole in the displacement. Like it'll become like a divot, a dip, like something carved out of the ground. On the other hand, something white will be a raised surface. So the reason we're using gray is so that we have an exact mid-range. So we can now keep this as the solid color of the snow, like all the standard snow is this much. And then if something is raised, like a little chunk of snow or something like that, that one's going to be white. And then if it's something like a tire track, that's going to be darker and it's going to be, lower than the average snow, So that's why we're using this exact gray color. Now, in order to see this over the top of our gray here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to invert that by hitting Control I, and then I'm going to set this to multiply. Great. Now, let's actually, once I lock this, I'll lock that so I don't accidentally paint on it. Let's get painting. The brushes. Now, let's talk about the brushes first before we get to painting. We have created a collection of brushes. We've got 9 brushes here. We've got some tractor brushes. We've got another different tire brush. Yeah, a bunch of different ones here. We've got some footprints. How cool is that? And yeah, a bunch of different displacement stuff. And you can get these brushes for just $99. No, these are free. Okay, so we created these brushes and we want to give them to you for free as a gift. We found that we had a look at some brushes online that you could, download from various places, and nothing really worked as well as, our own brushes. We decided to make our own because it just, yeah, it gives you a lot more. We have an exact look that we're trying to go for. We're painting snow, for Pete's sake, displacement snow. So we've crafted these brushes, and these will allow us to create snow that actually looks like snow. So you can download these by clicking the link underneath this video. I think it only works with Photoshop. I think you can probably load it into GIMP as well. If not, maybe one of you out there can convert it to GIMP for all the GIMP followers. But anyways, go ahead and download it, and let's get painting. So I'm going to use this brush right here, which is this sort of standard car tire track looking thing. There we go. And I'm going to set the color to be black. I'll turn the flow all the way up to 100. Oh, come on now. 100%. See, Photoshop's not perfect. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to do one fluid stroke of this tire. Like that. Okay, now the reason this has to be fluid is that if you start wobbling around like that, then obviously that does not look like a tire at all. That looks like a hand-drawn spaghetti line or whatever. So you want it to be, so this is where having a tablet, I guess, helps. Or maybe a mouse would probably be better for this. I don't know. Now, if you want a shortcut for the, actually that looks pretty good. I was going to suggest you could use the pen tool. Go like this, whatever, and then you right click and then you go set as stroke path, go, and then it just draws the tire track for you. But I managed to do that with one stroke there, so that worked out fine. Oh dear. Okay, I didn't actually get. You have to make sure that you've got your tire track as the same width as this line here, because that was the whole point of doing that scaling thing. So let's do that again. Come on. One more. Do it with your shoulder. Oh, there we go. Look at that. That's a straight-ish looking line, which is pretty good. All right, cool. So now you don't want to paint another one by hand like right next to it because it never matches. What you want to do instead is duplicate it and then just position it wherever you want. Okay, so I'm just positioning it exactly so it lines up with the tire track there, and that's it. So now I can actually turn off that blocking that we did. Now we know we've got a correct scale of the scene. Now we can actually start getting into it. So what I'll do now is I'll export this as a JPEG just to demonstrate how it looks in Blender. So ooh, gosh, what's going on? Blender. Okay. So with Blender loaded up here, I'll just switch to my mouse. I'm going to go ahead and add in a subsurf subsurface, what's it called? Subdivision surface, subsurface, oh my goodness, subdivision surface. And this is going to give us more geometry to play with. So more geometry for the displacement. So underneath that, I'm going to add in a displacement modifier, and I'm going to click new for the new texture. Go to the texture plane over here, click on displace texture, and then down here, I'm going to load in that image that I've just saved, that JPEG there. And there we go. Now, if it looks like this, that means that it's using the wrong coordinates. So for the displacement down here, go texture coordinates, go from local to UV. And there we go. Look at that. Directly over where we painted it before, we've now got it cutting into the mesh. Now, this is, as you can see, it's like pretty low poly. The more you set this subsurface to, the more it's going to, start looking sharper and sharper. But you can see down here, it looks like some sort of, Vietnamese death trap or something. It's very, very sharp. Now, the reason for that, and it's the reason I really demonstrated it, is that is caused by sharpness in our texture here. So although this doesn't look that sharp, it really, like for a displacement map really needs to be very, very smooth. So let's just merge those two layers there, the two tire tracks. So they are one. And now let's just try that again, but I'm going to set it to Gaussian blur 3. 2.6. Yeah, kind of blurry like that. And I'm going to go export as JPEG. Save it again. And then if I just hit that reload button there, that little icon there, it's now going to reload. And look at that. So you could see the difference that made. So blurring your map is incredibly important. If you don't do it, you will always have sharpness in your map, okay? All right, so that's the first bit. We've got the tire tracks on now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to paint the a couple of things. We're going to cut. So a tire would never cut directly through the snow like that. Like part of the snow would cave in, right? So that's the look that we want to go for. In fact, if I just load up, some reference images that I've got here, this is the sort of look that we want to go for. You can see that edge there, like part of it is like crumbled in, like that. So we've got to have that crumbled sort of edge to it, okay? So that's what I'm going to do right now in Photoshop on a new layer directly underneath that one there. So I'm going to go to the brush and I'm going to use this brush right here. So this is like it's very, very close to like a standard soft brush, but it's just got a little bit of detail on it. Okay. So with this brush here selected, so I'm putting this underneath the tire track on a new layer. And I'm just going to start painting. I'm going to set the flow to this to be about 30%. And this is just going to allow me a little bit more of a... So the size of the brush has to be a little bit bigger than your tire tracks because you want it to look caved in, right? That's the whole point of this. So I'm just going to go like this. So you don't want to rush this too much. Like I found like every time that I've tried to make the snow and I rush the displacement painting, which honestly, like you can't help sometimes because it's quite repetitive, especially for something like this, like tire tracks. Every time I rush it, it just comes out not looking perfect. But at the start, it's probably good to rush it so you can sort of learn, what works, what doesn't work. But yeah, just so you know, if you find later on that your scene is looking pretty crap, it's probably because you need a little bit more tender loving care on your displacements there. So here we go. We're almost... Oh gosh. It just goes on and on. So I'll just do one of these and then I'll cut to the... I'll do the other one off screen so you don't have to watch me basically doing the entire tutorial twice. Okay. That seems pretty good to me. Okay, so now... I'm going to turn the opacity on that down. And for the actual, let's turn that one off. Just set the tire track here. I'm going to set that opacity down as well. Like I find like you don't want the tire tracks to be like that. That's way too deep. Okay. So yeah, set it to around about 30%. And then for the, this tire thing here as well, like the caving in, we might go with, I don't know, let's try 40 maybe. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and export that. Yes, replace it and hit recycle, whatever. And look at that. There we go. So you can see now that tie track looks a lot better than this one over here. So that's just one little extra area of detail. I'll make this subsurface, I'll set this to 4. I set it to 5, sorry. So you can see just a little bit more detail in it. Now we do need to do something for this because you can see like there's a little bit, yeah, it's not too bad actually. There's a little bit of jagged edges on this, which you could fix by blurring that map. But I'm realizing it's actually not that bad. And if you set this to smooth, smoothing your object. Is there a hotkey for that, by the way? Shading smooth. I feel like it's something that's so necessary. Yeah. Anyways. Yeah, it probably needs to be smooth just a little bit. So I would go... Where's my mouse? Oof. Yeah, I'd just take this and I'd blur it. I probably... no, not box blur. Blur. Gosh. I'm just trying to think, like, how much more stuff have we got to get through? And I'm just fiddling with blur. I would just do that, okay? But I'll cancel that. And I'm just gonna paint this other one. But again, I'm going to pause it so you don't have to see me do it. And there we go. So, now we've got both of them done. We've got some tire tracks. We've got this divot underneath it. In fact, we might as well name these tire tracks divot. Is that how you spell divot? One of those words you don't really need to spell ever, except for maybe once every 5 years. Divot. Now what we're going to do is add on, we're going to paint on something white. Snow white. And this is going to be the edge of the divot. Because basically when a tire plows through some snow, it kicks up or it pushes to the side, you know, the snow that it is pressing down. So part of it is pressed down and compressed, and the other part sort of heaves up out, like squishes on the edges. So that's a terrible explanation, but essentially I'm talking about that edge there, that raised edge, which you can see, that's what it looks like after it's been there for a few days and then probably snowed on top of it. But like this, okay? So this raised edge there. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint a really smooth raised edge, which is going to give it sort of like the volume. And then I'm going to use another brush to create that choppy, messed up snow, which sort of just gets scattered everywhere. Whatever. Yeah, I'm looking at Star Wars. Like basically that frothy, I call it the scuff. The snow scuff. Okay, so we'll do that on a separate layer after this one. Let's just do one thing at a time, Andrew. Okay. So, I'm using, what brush am I going to use? Yep, this same brush here. It's a nice big one. Setting it to white. I'm going to leave the flow at 30, which should be good. And I'm just going to paint roughly like that. In fact, that is way too bright. Like, can we turn it down a little bit? Maybe the opacity. Isn't it weird that there's an opacity and a flow, and they both do essentially the same thing, except for like there's like a few functions, like one of these modes or whatever, which treats them differently. I don't know, but they just ultimately sort of do the same thing, right? I don't know. Someone's going to tell me off in the comments. So yeah, it helps actually if you hide the tire tracks. I'll set the divot to be 100 just so that you can see it better. So essentially where where the caving starts to happen, you've got this sharpened edge there. Okay, so just and what this will actually do as well, and I learned this during my little painting challenge, one of the few things that I've learned that's sort of been applicable to Blender. But that's relativity for color and anything is so important. That for example, like if you're drawing a nose and you're doing like shading on a nose, or I don't know why I picked nose, just shading anything, right? And you got to have that highlight. Like actually, like a lot of artists, they don't actually do a highlight. What they do is like they pick an area that's not shaded for the highlight, and then they just draw like it darker around whatever area they want to do a highlight. And that automatically makes that area look so much brighter than the rest of the scene, just by being in contrast next to something so much darker. Which, you hear about that a lot, like relativity and or relation. I don't know, like how something compares to something else. But just seeing it and playing with it by hand, it was so true. Like it's it's just one of those things that it's there. As you can tell, I'm trying to fill in time with just random chit chat. How much? Oh, good. Sometimes it feels like this just goes on and on. So, anyways, that is one edge there. What I'll do though, is I'll now go to. I'm not going to do the others. I'll do that again while I pause it. But I'm going to go. I'm adding a mask there. And the reason I'm adding this mask is I'm going to flip it to this brush here, which is honestly a really, really cool brush. And it allows, like, I'll just show you what the brush looks like. Looks like this. Okay? It's a really, really cool brush. It's like it's the perfect snow brush. And I'm just going to use this mask here, and I'm just going to paint. Just overlay it just a little bit. And it's just going to chop away at that volume. Like, not too much, but you'll find, and you'll probably need to do this for the tire track and the divots as well. Like, any amount of variation is going to help you out. Okay, this is so subtle. I can barely see it. There we go. So any amount of this variation is, it's just going to make it look just a little bit more realistic than none. So that's why we're doing this, basically. So remember, after we've done this, we're actually going to do a separate layer where we're going to be painting on the actual crumbly bits, the scuff marks. And that's going to be a little more ramp. It's going to be like out here on this gray area over here. It's like a car was really gunning it through the snow and just like throwing snow absolutely everywhere. So we'll do that in the next step. But that is pretty good. So I'll go and save this. I'm going to pause the recording now and I'm going to do the others. Okay, so now I've done them both, and hopefully you have as well. Essentially, just continuing on and just drawing over the top of it and yada yada yada. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here, this white raised volume layer. I'm going to put that way at the bottom there, just to make sure that this dark value actually gets priority over it a little bit, right? And I've got to set this back to 30% for this divot. There we go. Okay. Okay, great. So that's looking good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this, export it as a JPEG. Yes. Thank you, Windows. This one. And let's go ahead and reload into our scene here. This displacement. Hopefully it looks okay. Oh, awesome. Good. It's always nerve-wracking. Because you don't know if it's going to look terrible. But that looks pretty good. That's, yeah, it definitely looks like it's been carved out. Now, we haven't even done the detail yet. This is the volume. So we're going to be adding in the detail, which is going to be that throw pattern, like that, yeah, again, while I was doing that, I was listening to a J.J. Abrams interview. This, like, see those little balls and the little chunks of snow? Like, that's what we're going to add right now, that little... That's what's going to make this look really, really cool. Cool. So what I will do, though, because I noticed looking at this, that it's way too deep, like these tire tracks, so I'm going to lower the opacity on that, and this is way too tall. So what that means is I'll set this to 30 for the tire track, maybe 20. Yeah, and the divot, I'll set that to 20 as well. And this raised layer, I'll set that to 80? No, 60. Yeah, cool. All right, so now I'll, what do I call this one? Raised volume. That's kind of what it is. So I'll add another layer on top of this one, and this is going to be the scuff. I'll just call it the scuff. And for the brush, I'm going to be using this brush here. Which, again, I mentioned is that great snow texture brush. And what I want to do is basically where that scuff is, I want to add in some chunks. So these are the chunks. I should have just called it chunks. But that sounds a little weird. So I'm just painting on right here. So you don't want, you don't want it to be too big like that. In fact, what I'll do is if you modify this brush here, you can adjust because it's a dual brush. I think it's a dual, but it's got a texture on it. So I can adjust the scale of this texture here. And that'll make it look a little bit like, so if you want like bigger chunks, you set that scale up and you can paint like some bigger looking chunks. And then if you want smaller chunks, you set it like right down. And then you've got, this little fine little chunky bits here. So that's what I'll do. In fact, I'll just paint with the small ones and then I'll add the bigger ones over the top of this. So again, just remembering that this is the sort of look that we're going for, that little scuffed, spray, I guess, that's sort of over the edge here. And just sort of around like this. So you can see we're not doing a lot in Blender for this tutorial. But, like I've said, it's really to get the good snow, that's done in the image editor. That's done in Photoshop or GIMP. It's all about this part, this detail that you add here. Like we're going to add materials later. We're going to add, the lighting and all that kind of stuff. And that's definitely going to help. But I find like a lot, like if you look at like, snow materials online, like there's so many people with snow node shaders and stuff. And a lot of it is trying to get like, you'll see it like it's got a lot of like displacement or like bump map to it, like the snow materials and tutorials you find online. And it's really like you're spending a lot of time on like flakes and like that shiny effect and things, because the snow just doesn't look right. Like it doesn't look like snow like that you sort of cut into. So I find like those materials, they're kind of trying to fake this. Like they're trying to get this natural bumpy displacement. And really it's not done in the material stage. It's done in the displacement stage. This is where your snow is going to start to look like snow. So yeah. Now, if you're wondering, like, why isn't there an easier way? Like, why can't we use something like what they used for Frozen? Like, I don't know, simulated snow. You can. If you want, you can try and, I don't know, download the molecular add-on or whatever for Blender and try and simulate some snow. But it's hugely time-consuming. Probably more than this. Way more consuming for, like, CPUs and stuff. This is, believe it or not, the easier method, and it gives you way more control doing it like this as well than leaving it up to a computer to simulate. So I don't know, it's one of those things. Maybe in the future it'll be it'll become like how ray tracing is today, like how in the old days they had to like really fake it, spend all this time with bounce lighting and all that kind of stuff and reflections, and now we just get it all for free. Maybe that'll be the snow of the future. I really don't know. Okay, so that's that part there. I might do some bigger chunks now, so I'm increasing that scale. And this is now those big pieces. I'll just turn the opacity on it down because we don't want the big pieces to sort of be chunkier than the smaller ones, if you know what I mean. Actually, maybe it should be. I don't know. And the reason I did it instead of like increasing or decreasing the size of the brush, because it doesn't matter how big the brush is, it's still, what it's painting underneath it is like a tiled texture. So that's why you have to adjust this scale in the Photoshop there. But that's, it's getting there. Dun, dun, dun. I might add a few ones out here, Alright, oh, that's a big chunk. That'll be alright. Okay. Oh, another big one right there. So again, I find like this is true for like a lot of things that you do in 3D. Like it's big detail with small detail, and it's that layered look that really gives you realism. So that's what this is. You did the tiny stuff before, and now I'm just laying over some bigger chunks as well. Maybe the reverse order makes more sense. I don't think it really matters. But anyways, that that now is, it's starting to look good. So what I'll do, just to test this out, we have to blur it by a fair bit because this is, yeah, this is that brush, which is, it's quite detailed. It's a detailed brush. So I'm just gonna, yeah, that looks pretty good. So I will export this as a JPEG. It's probably going to be too high of a matte because it's quite white. But let's just load this in. We should also see once I hit this, the tire tracks will become lower and this raised part will become lower as well. We should see some of that detail thrown over the top. There we go. Yeah, like I said, it's yeah, it's a little sharp. So I'll try turning that down to 40. And let's try exporting that. And let's see how that looks now. Because I'm not sure if that sharpness is because it's not blurred enough or because the whiteness is just way too white. Maybe it is. I don't know. That from the view here, yeah, that looks pretty crazy. So maybe set it to 20%. So I remember when I was first giving this a try, using the instructions from the guy who made this whole method, the guy who made the final image and everything, Gilham. Yeah, like I struggled. That's looking pretty good now. It's still probably a little bit too raised. Maybe I'd go like 15 or 10%. That's pretty good. But yeah, when I started, I struggled because I didn't know why. You know, like every value, like this whole painting method just felt so random and chaotic, and I couldn't figure it out. But really, it's a matter of like trying small things, testing it out, trying small things. You won't really know until you try it. Like you won't know how it's going to look. So just, you know, try an opacity of like 20, try 10, try whatever, and just see how it looks. So that there looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do just like I did before. I'm going to start painting in the rest of this stuff here, and then I'm going to unpause it. So I'll do all this while it's paused. You know what I mean. See you in a minute. And finished. There you go. So yeah, that actually took a little while. I don't want to say 20 minutes, but it was. I think it was about 20 minutes of just painting, just trying to get, you know, comparing it to a photo like this, having a look at the sort of scuff marks that appear, these little, you know, the little roly-poly, you know, little balls and things like that, and just painting it on there like that. So so there you go. So I'll set the blur again for that, even though you probably just, really, that only just happened in your world, but it feels like I've almost forgotten it. And then I'll set that to 20% for the opacity, and I'm also, I think that's pretty good. So now if we have a look at this in Blender, I've already loaded it in here so you can see it. That is how it is looking so far. Pretty good, pretty good. So yeah, looking really, really great so far. So yeah, make sure you save it. It's always important. So what we're going to do now is some footprints, because I know a lot of you out there are probably working on scenes where you need some footprints. So luckily we have a brush here, which is a foot. Dun, dun, dun. And now this is actually pretty easy to do, because it's automatically been set up like this brush size so that it is the exact sort of foot width apart that it should be, or at least close, you know. So we just need to basically set this to black and then just paint with it. So I'll turn the opacity up on that, and oh, make sure it's on its own separate layer, of course. Call this footprints, and like that. And I just want to make sure, looking at the original here, that this is about the same size. Yes, it is. Good, same width anyway. So that's what matters. Cool, so where do you want the footprints to go? It is entirely up to you. I'm going to have mine go down the middle here, and then go off that side, maybe around here a little bit, and then across, something like that. So that's obviously the right foot, so you got to have the left one as well, unless it's a one-legged fella, but two is generally more realistic. So just paint them right next to it. And that, by the way, that I zoom past it, it's the flip Y and flip, yeah, just flip, and then we're just painting like that. And, you know, you can try and tell a story with your footprints if you want, but, you know, it's pretty well, it's pretty basic. There we go. Okay, cool. So with this, we obviously have to blur it. So I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and it really depends on how sort of, because I mean, it's a footprint, so it should be sort of more filled in anyway. Maybe like 3, maybe 4. Yeah, that's getting somewhere. Okay, let's try that. And I'll also, actually I'll do it this way. So I'll duplicate that. And then I'll set this to blur some more. Blur even more. Like that. And then I'm going to invert it. And what this is going to do, if I put that underneath that one, is that's going to give us that raised edge. So essentially we've just done the exact same thing that I did for the tires there. Just by doing that. So yeah, so now if I was to, let's just save this displacement. Export it. And then load this in here. By the way, while that's loading, I'll try and get a... I thought I had some actual footprints, but anyways. There we go. So look at that. That's looking pretty cool. Come on, it's frozen on me. Oh. Why is that not working? Why can't I scroll in and out? Alright, well, I'm going to save it. Because it seems like something's broken. That'd be right. So I had to pause the recording and then unpause it, and now that's worked. Okay, there we go. So look at that. That's a very deep footprint, but I guess it has to be. Because, I mean, it's a foot going through the same deep snow that the tire tracks are. It's probably still a little too deep, though. So let's try just dial it back a touch. Dial back that opacity. And then the edge as well. Because the edge is not that... It doesn't have to be pushed out that far. In fact, it's way too over the top. So I might get that to be 40%. So just a really subtle amount. So let's try this now. Quick export as JPEG. And let's see how this one here looks. There we go. Very, very little change actually. But, you know, it's enough. It's pretty good. So what you could do is you could, you know, go here and you could make a group for your footprints and then make a mask for your group. Another little tip I've learned. And then, you know, just paint away at them. Like paint away which areas are going to be showing through or not, like that. You know, if you could be bothered, but honestly, I find it kind of looks pretty spot on like this. Like, there's no reason that there should be like half a footprint or whatever. So, I think that's pretty fine. One thing I will do now with the tire track here is I'm going to load up a mask here for this tire track, and I'm going to put some, yeah, I'm going to start carving away, because if you look at a real photo. Looking at ones like this, like you can barely see the actual tire because the crumbly bit's like falling on top of it. Like it's all over it. So we're just adding this to sort of cut away at it a little bit and not make it as perfect as it looks. So just go through it like that. Just find little bits and just paint over it. Doesn't have to be a lot, but any amount will definitely help. Because really, uniformity is it's the enemy of realism when it comes to CG. Because nothing in the real world is as perfect and straight as this tire track here is. It's just way, way, way too perfect. So I must say, like, working with this grayscale thing, it really starts to mess with your eyes after a while. I'm sure you'll notice it as well. But it becomes like one of those optical illusions where you're staring at a black line for so long that you start to see like it faded like to the left of it or the right of it, and it starts to look very weird. I'll do the same thing to this divot here as well, and I'll just paint away little areas here, and this is just going to act like that little crumbly rubble bit on this in the tire track there. So I don't know how, and just a little bit. Not too much. Maybe that flow should be turned down a bit. A little bits like this. It's this part here which is going to get, this step I mean, which is going to add your realism for you. Just making it look that extra little bit more believable. And then when you post it online, people are going to go, wow, it looks like snow. So realistic. And you'll know why it looks realistic. It's because you spent all this effort on this step. This has got to be really frustrating for those of you at home just watching this on YouTube. Just slowly inching your way through it. All right, let's export this one. Let's see how this one looks. Refresh. We should see the tire tracks here look a little bit more randomized. The divot areas, we should start to see it looking a little better. There we go. So that was a little too much. Yeah, a little too much. So I think with this group here, tire tracks, I think you can actually, you can't turn down the opacity of the mask. Mask options? No, that's the color of the opacity. So what I'll have to do is use another brush to go the other direction. So I will paint because it is a mask. So I'll be painting like that on top of it. And then if you paint enough, oh, it's the wrong one. You can start to erase it a little bit. So yeah, I used a brush which was too powerful. So I'll just do this over the top of everything that I've already done. All right, and I'm going to pause it whilst I'm doing this. And there we go. So now I've painted over it a little bit. We put it back in Blender. I've already loaded it in, and there you go. So now it's just that little bit of extra, you know, realism for the actual tire tracks itself, which is pretty important because you can actually see into them from where this camera is. So that is pretty important. Okay, cool. So make sure we save this now. Now what we're going to do is do a little bit of sculpting on the surface of this snow here, because that's looking incredibly flat out there. So with our plane here, I hate how Blender does that. It's like you select an object, but Blender's so slow to catch up, and you have to keep the mouse exactly where it is. Otherwise, I've hit control. There we go. Otherwise, it moves it, which is the most annoying, I don't know, bug. I guess it's a bug, right? Anyway, I'm going to turn the subsurf down. There we go. It's caught up finally. Set my render to 5 so I don't forget it. And now let's do some sculpting. So, go into sculpt mode, like this. And let's go, let's see. Okay. And what I want to do is I might just put this as a camera over here. Just want to paint in, oh, you can see mirror is turned on as well. So it's painting on both sides. So if you want to turn that off, just go down to symmetry and then uncheck X. And now you can paint on like normal. Okay, so I'll put that over here. Actually, I might do it in the other direction because that makes more sense. Okay, there we go. So, you know, you could use just the standard, you know, proportional fall off and just go into edit mode and just grab some pieces and just make them bigger or smaller. But you just get a lot more control with the sculpting brush. I'm going to turn down the strength of this. It's a little heavy. And we're just painting on this like a little snowbank over here. So however much you want to do here is entirely up to you. It's really, it's one of those things where, you know, I haven't really worked out a clear answer as to what's better, to have more or less of this, but really and a lot of this is to do with composition. So if you haven't seen my composition tutorial, you should check that out. But there's a lot to do with guiding the viewer. Now in this case, we've got some tire tracks going down the scene here. So it's very useful because it guides the viewer down those tire tracks, the pathway. But having these edges curled up here, it kind of works like a vignette, by keeping the viewer's eyes locked, you know, in this viewport, you know, like down the road. So it's not veering off to the sides because you've got these raised edges basically. So yeah. Anyway, as you can see, just trying to fill in the time here whilst I sketch all this in here. And I think that is pretty good, actually. A little bit more on that side. Raise that one up. There we go. Okay, cool. So snow is looking like snow, at least in the displacement view. Now we can finally get into the lighting. Now, when it comes to lighting an outdoor scene like this one, you can do the traditional method of lighting, adding a sun lamp, I don't know, rotating it like that, and then, I don't know, maybe add in a sky color to sort of act as that, and you can certainly do that. But the trouble with this is that, the colors aren't correct. You can adjust these a little bit like that, but it's faking the real world. And not only that, but the snow here, which we're going to be adding a material soon to give it reflectiveness, it's not reflecting the sky. Like, it's this uniform blanket blue color as opposed to there being clouds and yada, yada, yada. So instead, what I'm going to be using is, you might have already guessed it, an add-on that we developed at Blender Guru called Pro Lighting Skies. And there it is. So Pro Lighting Skies was it was made for this purpose, allowing you to get realistic outdoor lighting at the click of a button. So it's all photos from the real world, like these 360-degree panoramas, which cast, as you can see, very realistic lighting, accurate to the real world. Like, that spotlight there is like casting the light onto this scene here, and this blue from over here is casting blue in that direction, and the reflections, everything will look good. So essentially, it was developed because I hit this problem all the time. Like, you're making a scene, you want it to look realistic, but adding HDRs and everything was just way too time consuming. So anyways, so if you are interested in Pro Lighting Skies and you don't have it already, you can download it by going to the URL listed at the bottom here, or you can click the link underneath the video, which will take you to the purchase page. So anyways, that's what we're going to be using. So go ahead and use it if you've got it. Otherwise, just follow along as best you can. So I prefer, like, for this sort of scene, I think like a morning sort of light suits best, because like if this sort of lighting was like in the noon of the day, like, it doesn't make that much sense, because my limited experience with snow whilst living in South Korea was that this sort of thick snow doesn't last very long. Once the sun comes up, there's a few hours before it all starts to melt and turn to slush. So, your lighting scheme should be consistent with that. So I'm going to stick with something for the morning. Let's try, just cycle through them. That one there looked pretty good. Number 11 is pretty good as well. I like number 11. Number 12, it's a little bit too deep, that blue, though, for me. So I might go with this one. This one actually looks pretty cool. Yeah. We could turn down the sky or the sun if we want, but I might just leave it as is for the moment. Yeah. Okay, that looks pretty good. So what I'll do is I'll just give this a quick render with what we have at the moment. 5 subsurf for this, and let's just see how this looks. Okay, so that looks pretty good. It's you could see the displacement works fairly well, and the snow looks very detailed, which is very, very good, because contrast to how it looks, snow is actually very detailed, as we already discussed. What needs addressing now is that material, because gosh darn it, it looks horrible. It looks like plaster. And by the way, if you're worried about this background, we're going to fix that at the end there with some trees as well. But for now, the pressing issue is this snow material. So let's take a look at some photos. You can see I'm procrastinating again. Well, look at some Game Grumps. Okay, so this is a photo of snow. Now, so what we want to try and do is recreate a number of the things you can see here. So you've got this tiny little fine, like grains of sand, it looks like really, really tiny little bumps across the surface. You have the little flecks of reflection being cast into the camera there, so a little sparkly light. You've also got, like, very subtle to see, but it's like this like larger scale bumps across it, like just sort of like ripples across it. Very, very small there. A little bit of subsurface as well, probably, like the light actually casting through it. Like you can probably see it just on the top of that ridge there, like light sort of just, yeah, passing through that. So, yeah, so those are the sort of things that we want to try to create with our material setup. Now, it will be quite advanced. I do have to give you a bit of a heads up. There is quite a lot involved in making it work, but yeah, it should. I'll try and explain it the best way that I can. You can delete that image that we've placed there, by the way, because we don't actually need that anymore. So the first thing we'll try to create is that fine grain bump across the surface. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in a noise texture. So a noise texture is great whenever you need sort of uniform bump that just looks like noise. Go figure. So I'm going to go and plug this into the diffuse by taking the factor output and putting that into the normal input. Now, the reason that's doing that is because we haven't sort of converted this black and white into something that this shader here can use. So to do that, I'm going to add in a bump node and drop it in between it. And then make sure you, I don't know why it defaulted to that. It should be this height. So drop that in right there. And now you can see you've got this swirling pattern across the surface. But you'll see like the swirls are sort of like going along the surface of where we've done that sculpting. And that means that the coordinates are a little bit screwed up. So what it should really be, it should be using the generated coordinates. Or not, yeah, hang on, let me just load this in. Texture coordinate node. How did it know I wanted that? That'd be cool if Blender started predicting things like that. We're going to take the output of the object and put that into the noise vector input there. And now it's using the right one. I don't know why, but this generated one, you'd think that would be the one you need, but yeah. Anyways, so we're setting that to object, and I'm going to set this scale here to be something crazy, 150, which is giving us that really finer grained sort of look. And then, of course, you want to turn down the strength here. So I'm going to set this to 0.05, like that. So there you go. It looks like the surface of a golf ball. Well, no, a leather couch, more like it. But also snow, right? Right? Means we're getting somewhere. Okay, that's good. And those values there are pretty good. Cool. I'm using on my other screen here, I've got the actual node setup I need to follow, because there's a lot of moving pieces here and you don't want to mess it up. So one other thing is like this looks like plaster. Like there should be some sort of reflection from the sun. Not the sun specks, like the little fleck, how do you go, like glitter, not that effect yet. We'll do that later, but just sort of like a fine, smooth look across the surface. So for that, I'm going to add in a glossy shader and just use a mix node, put that into the bottom input, and then I'll set this to, let's go 0.25. It sounds like I'm guessing. I'm just reading the next screen next to me. And this is just like a blend. So if you go all the way that way, it's diffused. This way, it's all the way glossy. So yeah, just about 0.2. And then I'll take that bump and make sure that's being used for the glossiness as well. And that is pretty good. So that, that looks quite shiny. So if it's too, like this is kind of like if it's been melted a little bit. Like actually I had a photo here, which was pretty good. Yeah, like this. Like you could tell this snow is like melting. So I wouldn't want to be climbing it, It looks like it's going to slide off pretty soon. Yeah. So if that's, if that doesn't work for you, the other thing as well, you probably want to turn up the roughness so that's not as sharp, because otherwise it really does look wet. So something like that looks pretty good. But yeah, if it's too much, you can just, turn it back or whatever. To really, I mean, that's the thing, like somebody's memory of snow might be very different to the one you've made. So they might be like, oh, that's not how snow looks. But really, like, as the Inuits have said, like, no two snowfalls are the same. Like, they've got, 40 words to describe snow or something. I don't know if that's a myth. Anyways, I don't know why I'm just keep talking. We've got stuff to do. Let's create now those little sun flecks. What do we call it? Flicks? Let's I don't know. Let's call it glitter. Let's create the glitter. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a Voronoi texture here using the same object, like the texture coordinate, object texture coordinates for that Voronoi texture. And let's just plug this into, just so we can actually see it. What can I do here? Let me see, just so we can actually see how this looks. Let's plug that into that. Okay, so that is the effect that we've got right now across that surface. All right, that's not how we're going to use it. This is just so that I can demonstrate sort of how it looks. Now, if we choose cells, then that's how this looks right here. So this is giving us some sharper, like, I don't know, like desert cracks. Now, if we turn this way, way, way down, or sorry, way up, that makes the scale of them smaller and smaller. And if you go really, really low, it starts to look like flecks. Glitter, let's just call it, yeah, I'm going to call it glitter from now on. So we want to basically have this effect a glossy shader. So I'm going to add in a separate glossy shade, not this one here. We'll leave it. This is going to act as like the fine shine across the whole surface. And this is going to be a separate one on top of that. Okay, so we're going to add in over here, after the mix shader, I'm going to add in an add shader. Let's just drag this in over here. And so that we can cut, like define which parts are glossy and which parts aren't, I'm going to add in a mix shader. And then take the output of this factor input and then put that in there. So now if we look in close enough, we should be able to see like a glittery type of effect across the surface. Let's try 100 there. There we go. There we go. We're getting somewhere. Okay. Now that doesn't look very good. It looks like it's barely working. So here's a trick. And this is one that, yeah, it had to be explained to me. So when the artist that I hired, Gilherm, shout out to Gilherm Henrik, made this scene, he created this weird setup. And it's basically taking the color output of this Voronoi texture and then feeding it through a normal map, which was odd to me because normally you don't ever do that. Why would you put... Normal map is used for images of a specific normal map type of texture. This is a image texture, but apparently... This raw Voronoi texture, like if you have a look at it just through the this diffuse, like you see that colorful noise there across the surface, that is very similar to a normal map texture. So what you can actually do is you can cheat. You can use that, feed it through a normal map texture, then put this through the into the glossy shader there, and look at that. It starts to behave like the glitter, like it's at different surfaces. Because if you look at real snow, like where was it? I guess this one. Like it reflects at weird angles because it is like tiny little grains of sand. Some of them are rotated at different angles, so you're going to get reflections depending on like that aren't all lining up with the sun, if that makes sense. Like if you look along the surface of a car reflection, like on the bonnet or whatever, you see it if the sun is directly behind it. But that's not how the snow works. Like you're getting, glittery reflections everywhere. So that's what this is doing. Like it's giving us that glittery reflection in places that aren't directly in line with the sun. Because like if you remove that, you could see there's no glittery reflection there. It's only going to line up with wherever that glossy shader is, right? So by feeding it through there, then you actually get it. So that is cool. That's a cool little thing. And directly underneath it, what I'm going to add in to put into the slot underneath it is a translucent shader. And this, you won't see too much of a difference, but I'll show you anyway. This is the before, and this is the after. Just very subtly, like some of those sun flecks start to sort of pop out a little bit as well. Very, very, very subtle. So you'd be forgiven if you just completely ignored it, but it just adds a little bit more of a boost to those that glittery effect. Okay, cool. Now this size of this I think is actually too big, so I'm going to drop this down to 300, make it a little bit finer. And then I'm going to make it a lot finer still. And I'm actually going to duplicate this whole node setup, the whole thing, just so I can do one little change here. And that is to make this a lot smaller. And then I'm going to duplicate this mix shader, drag this into the bottom one there. And now you can see if I zoom, oh, hang on, from the camera view, let's zoom right in there. You can now see we've got really, really tiny little reflections, which is this new one right here. Like if I just pull that all the way that way, that's the really tiny reflections. And then this is the big one right there. So essentially, yeah, it's like, what is that? 5 times? 5 times? Let's try that. Yeah, it's 5 times. Okay, cool. So there we go. So now we've got some tiny little glittery dots, some bigger ones. And this amount here, it really depends on how much you want. Like if you want lots of big ones, you can go that way. Or if you want little ones, you can go this way. I mostly go little ones with a little bit of the big ones. And that's about it for that. Let me just check my notes here. Yes. Oh, the other one you might want to play with as well is the roughness. So I'm going off the record here. The real material setup that I'm following here has like this invert thing plugged into here, but it doesn't look good. So I'm actually I'm recommending something else. So essentially, this roughness, like the more you set this, like the wider it's going to be, like the more of that glittery reflection you're going to get. But the less sort of concentrated it can look. But anyways, I don't know. I think that default value there actually looks all right. So let's just leave that as is. All right. Oh, one other thing you might want to change as well is the strength of it. So let me just drop this down actually. Just so we're only looking at one, so we can play with the value and see how it looks. So we're looking at the big one here. Now, if you reduce this strength amount, you're going to get more of that, more of those little glittery effects. You'll get more or less like at a certain value. So like 0.5, you'll get more, and then you start to get less and less as it goes up, I think. Let's just increase it more and more. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, so if you go like really far one direction, then you get way less. Yeah, like if you go to 10, you get very few, which is actually pretty good. I think that's good. I might go 10. Yeah, stuff it. Let's just go 10 with both of them. Because I think there is too much glitter there. It does look a little too shiny. So that's all right. Let's go with that. Cool. Great. Awesome. All right, so now what we need to do is give it a very subtle, just across this, because this surface here looks way too soft and silky. It needs to look a little more noisy, a little bit more of a bump to it. So we're going to use this displacement input for the material here, which is very similar to putting it through this normal of the shaders, but you can't fit two in one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a noise texture right here, and I'm going to feed it through a multiply mix. So basically, a mix shader, math node set to multiply, and then this basically controls its bump amount. So if I drag that into there, let's just turn this up. Okay, there we go. So it's got that swirly effect again. So we need to make sure that we're using the correct object output for that map. There we go. So that's way too strong, obviously. So let's dial that back to something like that. Not bad. And I'm going to increase the scale, or drop the scale to about 4, but increase the detail to the maximum. So that's giving us that fine sort of amount across it, which is pretty cool. I think that bump is too high though, so I'm just dialing it back a little, something like that. Now this is actually sort of amplified because the sun is directly behind us, or sorry, in front of us, I guess. So if we, I don't know, if I had this at like coming from another direction, you wouldn't see as much of that bump. You kind of do. But you know what I mean. It's just sort of playing around with it now. Yeah, but that snow is really starting to look like snow. So that's a good thing. One thing I might do though is I might just increase this glossy amount here just to get more of a finer shine across the surface. So I'm just dropping the roughness to it just to make it look a little bit more melted. Like, the sun is shining directly on it. Like there's got to be a lot of melted sort of look to it. So I think that should help make it look a little bit more realistic. But yeah. Let's try that. Cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and give this a render with our new material. Let's see how that looks. All right, there we go. That is actually looking pretty cool. That is not bad. Yeah, pretty good. One thing that it is definitely missing though is subsurface scattering. So here's a before and after from another scene that I was working on with a different lighting setup. This looks pretty cool. So this is before subsurf and this is after. So if I just go in between the two, you can see the difference there. It's subtle, but it gives it a softer, more realistic look. Because essentially what subsurface is doing, for those who don't know, is real light passes through a surface. So when it passes through, you know, your ear or something like that, you can see, you know, red blood cells and things like that. So, you know, the sun is passing through the snow. So it's, yeah, it's essentially passing some of that light through. So you can see, like, if we zoom in there, oh, you can't go back and forth. But you can see, like, on that little piece there, like the light passes through that. So it sort of fades into it. So that's what we want to add here. So it will probably mean that you might need to render on CPU. No, actually you can render with GPU. But yeah, it does add a little bit of noise to it maybe, but it does just add a subtle little kick to it, which can just help make it look a little bit more realistic than without it. So let's go ahead and add that. Very simple. It only needs two nodes, the mix node and this subsurface scattering node. Sorry, I was just trying to connect everything there. There we go. So I'm going to drop that into the bottom input right there. And I'll just drag that all the way over to 1 just so that we can focus on how this looks in our scene over here. So it says it only works in experimental mode for GPU. So let's put it on experimental mode. Let's do what the Blender says. And for the scale, I'm going to turn it way down to be 0.1, which is just going to give it just a small amount of scattering through it before it starts to fade out. So the more you set that to, like, the greater distance, it will, you know, allow the light to pass through it. But I'm just going to go 0.1 like that. And that's pretty good. And now that I've done that, I can then fade that into the rest of the scene that we just had before, setting that to point. So this is the scene that we had, just the entire scene that we had there before. And then if I set this to be 0.2, then that works there. Now the light is actually shining through directly, like through the bottom of the mesh there. So, you know, you could fix this by just going, I don't know, grab this bottom one here, drag that down. I'm sure there's probably a better solution to this, isn't there? I'm just not thinking of it. But that's the one that I would do anyway. But there we go. I'm actually not really a big fan of this light setup anyway. So I'm going to go for a different light setup. Let's go for... Yeah, you can see it does take a little longer to render now that we've added that subsurface there. But, yeah. As you can see, like, the light really does make a difference to the scene, like the light setup that you choose. So, you know, choose wisely, friends, because it can mean the difference between a good or a crappy render. All right. I'm just going to try and get a little bit more light peeking through there. But that's pretty good. All right, so now let's do another render. Yeah, this light's, I like it. Now that I've had a look at this one, the before, just wanted to throw that one in there because I thought it actually looked a lot better than the one that we've created. So let's now give this another render with those settings, and let's see how that looks. All right, the CUDA ran out of memory. Let's try it on CPU. The fallback for any, well, what you have to do every day if you're on AMD. All right, let's see how it goes with CPU. Okay, there we go. So it finally finished. Cool. So you can see here, we've now got a little subtle amount of subsurf going through the snow. You can really see it on there. Oh, nice. Grease pencil. But there you go. Cool. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and add in the trees into the background. The final piece of the puzzle. And of course, on cue, my monitor has, I'm using that F-Lux thing. That thing that, like, changes your display. And right at the moment, resume recording, it kicks on. There we go. Makes the screen yellow. Probably can't see it in the recording. All right. So to add the trees in the background, we're actually going to be using another product from Blender Guru, shock horror, called the Backdrop Pack. So what this is well, first of all, I'll just show you. So to use the Backdrop Pack, we just use the Import Images as Planes add-on, just to add-on, great add-on that works for any images, but it works great for this stuff in particular. I'm going to go Import Images as Planes. Oh, look, here we are. So what this is a collection of alpha masked trees, and in particular tree lines. Because essentially you need it for basically any scene you're working on. It helps to have something on the horizon. If you've got like a bare horizon, it just looks fake. And I went online and I tried to find, tree lines, and there basically aren't any. So we had to hire some photographers around the world to. You wouldn't be you would be amazed at how hard it is to find an area where you can actually photograph like a bare tree line like this. But anyways, enough about that. If you're interested in getting this pack, just click the link here, and you can get the backdrop pack and get all these images. And hope you find it interesting. So I'm just gonna try a couple. Let's try this one. The most important thing is you want to check use alpha so that it uses the PNG alpha background there, and then make sure you use emission and transparent, or if you want the light, the actual sunlight to hit it, you can use diffuse and transparent. I'll just try emission, and let's just see how this one looks. So the reason you use that import as images as planes is that it gets the right image dimension, so there's no like stretching or anything like that. Anyways, so I'll just drop this into the backdrop here. Oh yeah, I had to add in this plane here. So if you find a problem with like your scene where the lights are like shining through it, like through the snow part there, I just, to fix it, I just added a plane just randomly, and it just fixed it. I tried a whole bunch of different things whilst the recording was paused. I don't know why, but I didn't actually need this for my final render that I've been experimenting with. It's one of those cases where everything goes wrong whilst the recording is going. But it's such a large-scale tutorial. I'm hoping you guys will forgive me. If you don't, screw you. Who cares? No, I'm kidding. All right, so let's see how this looks here. I'll put it back into GPU just so we can render it. And there we go. So we've got some trees chilling on the background there. Now, in this case, those trees look pretty fake because it doesn't match the lighting. So the trick really comes in finding the best sort of image to use for something like this. But you can also experiment with, instead of, the option that I had before was emission or diffuse. So to save me from using the add-on again, I'm just gonna very quickly switch it out like this. Okay, that's a little better. I mean, it doesn't quite match the scene, because I guess it's just in total darkness, but it's better than nothing. Which is all right. You know what? I might just add a couple more. Let's just see what else we can do here. See what else there is. Oh dear, what have I done? Okay, so I'm going to go File, Import Images as Planes, and let's try a different one. How about this one? This one's got some sunlight hitting on it. Generally, sunlight is pretty hard to get it to match, like any sunlight you've got in your scene. If it's in the background, it definitely helps, but yeah, it's a bit fiddly. This is just one of those things, though, where it feels like it's a small thing, like why are we bothering to spend time on this, when we've done all, the snow is the main part of it, but this extra little bit at the end here, it definitely helps to make the scene feel complete. And that doesn't fit at all, because that's just completely the wrong sunlight to be working for this scene. Oh dear. Okay, let's try it again. Let's try another one. I'm going to try one more. If the next one doesn't work, we'll just leave it with those trees in the background there. Let me see here. Let's see. How about, we could use that one. Or we could use this one. I think this winter one here will... Actually, I'll use this one. Oh, what's it doing? There we go. Let's use this one. I think this one will work. Because this one at least sort of looks like it should be in darkness, So let's drag that in. Yeah. So there we go. So you know what? I might just fix it by having the sun come from the rear again, and that looks a little better, kind of. No, maybe it's not. Maybe it's better, over on this side. But you know what? This is all fiddly stuff, and I'm sure very few of you are even still here watching. You're like, all right, we get it, Andrew. That's it. You can add trees in the background and the final image. But anyways, the main part of this tutorial was, of course, the snow. So I'm hoping that you guys will find some use for this, and make some cool looking scenes with it. As you can see, it is really all about that displacement part, that painting of the displacement. It's don't overlook it, because that is where the gold is. That's where the nuggets are. So keep at it, and if you make something cool, please post it in the comments on Blender Guru. I like browsing through it every now and then and seeing what people have been making. So yeah, if you make something cool, please post it in there. And as always, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Bye.